Loaded bases. How's it going?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, I'm glad that we finally came to a time that we could talk.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Oh yeah. So what do you do right now? What's your current job status?
Yeah, great question. For the last almost year and a half now, I've been employed by the Cleveland Indians. I'm in our player development staff. My job, more specifically, is a minor league affiliate hitting coach. So this coming year, I'll be working with our rookie level hitters out in Goodyear. I'm really excited about that level. But I'm one of several guys within the organization. We have hitting coaches at every level.
Yep.
We obviously have a ton of analysts and directors and things like that help out. The hitting staff's pretty large, but I'm one of the people on the ground every day with the players in the dugout, in the cage, and just trying to help those guys any way that I can. They're all on that journey to the major leagues, and just kind of fortunate to be a part of it.
So yeah, it's definitely not a direct journey to get into the bigs. There's a lot of stuff that goes in with it.
Yeah, yeah.
So so how did you how did you get involved in baseball? I guess what's your story?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the real question is how far back do you want me to go?
Let's see. Well, I have your baseball reference pulled up.
Uh-oh.
And so okay, so you played so what year did you graduate high school?
So I was a 2010 graduate
Okay.
from San Ramon Valley High School in Danville, California.
So then how did you get into professional baseball? How did that journey
Yeah.
start?
Yeah, that's a cool question. It's something that I dreamed about for sure as a kid. Like a lot of kids, I guess. And I have, my dad and my brothers to thank for that. And, we just kind of play together a lot in the backyard. And I think early on, that was just something that I had a real passion to do. And I think when I was really young, I was pretty good, little league and all that fun stuff. And then I went through kind of a rough patch where I was physically behind a lot of the kids I was playing with. Particularly, I look back at like my freshman year in high school. I was barely good enough to be on the team. I never played. I was told by a coach at that point that I probably shouldn't play anymore. He basically told me that I had no chance to play. And that's one of those moments. And I was a young man, and you have a decision to make, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You can either buy into that or you can choose to do something. And I chose to try and do something. And I kind of transformed my body. I had a ton of help. Worked really hard. Got stronger. Luckily, I kind of started to physically develop at that time as well.
Mm.
Turned myself into a decent high school baseball player, and was fortunate to get an opportunity to go play at the junior college level because I was kind of a late bloomer. I really wasn't on anyone's radar. So I was recruited to go play at Chabot College for Steve Friend and Will Tavis was the guy. Those are the two guys that recruited me. Steve Friend, longtime head coach over there. Two guys that I'm still really close with. Two guys that I have a ton of respect for that have done a ton, not only for me in my baseball career, but kind of helping shape who I've become as a man. And I think that's really important to them. And I'm certainly grateful for that and something that I've kept with me now as a coach. But spent a couple of years there. Like I said, that was not too far from where I grew up. I actually commuted. I lived at home with my parents. So I didn't have the traditional going away to college as a
Hey,
freshman, sophomore.
it saves money.
It did save some
That is
money.
for sure.
I know we're grateful for that. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of like a welcome to adulthood. I started to look, I think at that point in my life, when I was 18, 19 years old, I started to look at baseball as a profession, and I started to treat it like a professional, in the sense that every decision that I made revolved around that. Decisions I made in my social life, in my personal life, all revolved around that. I did that for 2 years, and then I was fortunate, kind of just by chance, my roommate at the time, or my roommate that would have been my roommate when I moved out to Tennessee, he was getting recruited by a school in Tennessee that I had never heard of, Austin Peay State University.
Yeah.
They came out to check on him, and I was fortunate enough to have a pretty good day when they came out. And a guy by the name of Joel Manger, who's actually a coworker of mine now, ironically enough,
Wow.
was the guy that saw me and recruited me, and I got to go out there and play for a great program. I got to play in a nationally ranked program. We had a great season. I was able to do some things that year. I was really fortunate to be surrounded by the coaches, Gary McClure, Derek Dunbar, Joe Lincoln. Those are the guys that kind of helped with Joel. And, I had some great teammates. And like I said, I was able to have a good year and
Yeah.
caught the attention of a scout for the San Francisco Giants by the name of Hugh Walker. And they took me that year in 2013 in the summer. And that was the team that I grew up cheering for. So that was a pretty surreal day for not only me, but I think my entire family, my grandpa, my dad, my mom, my brothers, my grandparents. It was really, really pretty cool. So that was kind of what led up to my introduction to professional baseball.
Yeah. See, I mean, that's like baseball is definitely a game of numbers and averages, and your average on that day that they saw you just, I mean, it's crazy like how that works.
Yeah, it's and I've it's just kind of funny how those things work out, like you said. Like it was such a chance, and like I said at the time, like full disclosure, like I didn't know what Austin P was. Like I had never
Yeah.
heard them. I was a California kid, and what a blessing it was to get to go out there. And ironically enough, Nashville's become home for not only me but my family as well. And I think that was kind of our introduction to that area. So yeah, like you said, man, it's funny how those things work out. It certainly worked out well for us, and I'm super grateful for that opportunity.
So yeah, so you got drafted the 33rd round in 2013. How how did that process go?
Oof, man, that's a stressful couple of days for
I
sure.
bet.
For anyone that's not familiar with the draft, the baseball draft's spread out over basically a weekend.
Yep.
Of course, we're going through some restructuring now, so it'll be different. But back in those days, it was 40 rounds, and it was spread out over 3 days. And the first day is your I think it's first round and supplemental, I believe, maybe
Yep.
the second round as well. And then so I knew I wasn't getting drafted that day. I knew that wasn't what was about to happen. Second day is like rounds 2 through 10. It just depended on who you listen to. I
Yeah.
had some people telling me that was a possibility. And then, the third day is the rest. So they're just kind of ripping them off at that point. And so I was getting ready. I had just finished my junior year, so I had an opportunity to go back to school if that's what I chose to do, or if the draft didn't work out. So they had set me up to go play summer ball up in Vermont. So I actually drove from Clarksville, Tennessee, which is where Austin P is. And I was driving up to Vermont, and I had some family in Pennsylvania, some extended family. And so I stopped with them to wait out the draft, because if I didn't get drafted, I was just going to keep on driving basically and go play summer ball. So I spent a couple of nights at their house. I got a call the night after day 2 from Hugh Walker, the scout that I mentioned before that ended up drafting me. And he was just like, "Hey man, you ready to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, like I've been ready to go for like hours. I've just been sitting here." He's like, "All right, like tomorrow's your day." I'm like, "Okay." So it starts out at round 10, and I'm just watching this thing go and go and go. And I had watched my college teammate, one of my best friends, Tyler Rogers, who's up in the big leagues with the Giants now, another Austin P guy. I had watched him go at the end of day 2, and I was pumped for him. And I'm like, man, maybe we'll get to be teammates again. Like, this is awesome. And like, you're just watching all these picks get rattled off, and it's like, it's just agonizing. You're like, man. Finally got the call. I can't really describe it, to be honest. Like I just remember calling my dad and calling my mom, and just them being really proud, and me being really proud as well, and happy. I think I would have been happy to get a chance to play no matter what. The fact that it was the team that I grew up cheering for.
Yeah,
and
see, that part is cool.
Yeah, it
I could
was.
not imagine that one. That
Yeah, no, that was pretty cool. It was pretty surreal. Just another day that I'm super grateful for, another day that I'll never forget. And that happened, and I was in Pennsylvania, and I got on a plane the next morning, like really, really early. Flew back and spent like 24 hours with my parents, and then the next day I was in Scottsdale getting ready to go to camp and get ready to play, and got my introduction to the world of professional baseball.
So how nervous were you showing up to spring training for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know, like, so it's weird. Like the draft happens in June, right? So spring training's already happened. So
well, yeah.
yeah, and like, so the nerves are, I don't know. Like, I don't remember the nerves being that significant at that point because everyone that's there is in the same boat as you. And like at that time, like
I guess
you
I
have
can
to
see
have a
that's true.
certain edge to you as a professional athlete to, believe that you belong. And I did. Like I certainly had that edge. And but I do think my first spring training, like that is maybe when the nerves kick in a little bit because now the whole organization's
You
there.
see the big dogs there too.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. Like I remember walking by Field one day at the Giants complex, and seeing Madison Bumgarner throwing a flat ground, and I'm like, his arms look like they're 19 feet long, and he's just
yep.
and like that's a guy that you've watched on TV, and he's done some
Yeah.
pretty cool things, and yeah, and you know what, honestly, and I tell this to my guys now, like the guys that I coach now, like the biggest thing that I think you have to try and do as a young player at spring training is like try not to play GM. Like that's not your job. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have no control over what's going to happen. All you can do is take care of your business and let the chips fall where they may. And that was something I really struggled with as a young player because I'm looking around and I'm trying to figure out where I fit, right? Like it's like a puzzle. You're looking around, you're like, well, that guy's gonna go here. So where does that leave me? Like he was a higher draft pick than me. And like that's a hard thing to try not to do. And I think that's where the nerves came from is understanding that like I have no control really over where I go. And ultimately I landed that first spring training and extended, which is where you don't want to be. Um, so yeah, I think to answer your question, that's when the nerves kicked in. I think
Yeah.
that first summer I was really confident and happy with where I was at. So
Good. Yeah. I mean, so I mean, like, if I say if I was in your spot and then I was drafted by a team that I absolutely loved, I think I would probably feel the same way. It would almost be like I want to worry about the big club because that's like how it would have been like for the past years because you're a fan of them, but you're actually employed by them and you can't really worry about that.
yeah, yeah. And I think it was cool too. I still remember like, cause like I said, I lived in the Bay Area at that time and
Yeah.
I remember going to the airport and to fly to spring training and then even getting into Phoenix airport. And, you see people walking around with like Giants hats and Giants shirts at that time. And, it's kind of a surreal moment. You're like, man, like that's who I'm employed by. And
Yeah.
that's really cool. And there's a ton of pride that goes with that. And like I said, I'm super grateful for that opportunity. It didn't end where I had dreamt that it would. It didn't last maybe as long as I had hoped that it would.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that things happen for a reason,
Exactly.
and I think that a lot of those trials and stuff kind of led me to where I am today and who I am now, and and that'll continue to happen. I'll continue to grow, hopefully.
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk like about like the minor leagues being like, there's a lot to go with the minor leagues that people don't even realize. So my first job, so I actually was a bat boy for the Yakima Bears, and I believe I believe Yakima was still in low A, maybe when you played for Salem. I think.
You know what? I don't think so, but you could. I was in that league for like 2 weeks, and then I got promoted, so you could be right.
Damn. So yeah, because 2014, well, because Yakima they got sold to Hillsboro.
Hillsboro, that was Hillsboro's first year in the league.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was, I mean, yeah. So funny story on that one. So there was so a guy that I was talking to, when I was a bat boy for them back in like 2000, it was like 2009. It I was actually his bat boy. It was just like a small world, and then like we started talking, and then he was like, "Holy shit! Like I remember you." But no, I mean, and then I mean like all the stories like from the minors. I mean, like what would be the craziest thing that you can say on this? I mean, I mean like that you were just like, I'm in the minor leagues. This like, is this worth it?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think my mind immediately goes to some of the living situations.
Mm,
Like, I mean, you hear stories, right? And like, I had some great host families too, which is kind of like a hard thing to explain to people that don't work in sports. Cause like,
yeah.
the concept of a host family is kind of strange, but I had some really good ones. But like even like apartment living, like we had, I'm trying to remember when I was in Augusta, we had, I think 4 or 5 of us in like a 2-bedroom apartment.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, like I had a mattress. I had a mattress out in the main area where like there should be a dining room table if we were like normal adults. Um, so I
But you're in
slept
the
there.
minors.
Yeah, no, I mean, and then like some of the food, like I remember sometimes we'd go in the locker room after like a day game on a getaway day, and they'd have like a rotisserie chicken for us and whoever sat next to us on the bus, and it was just we just get on the bus and just be like eating rotisserie chickens like with our bare hands and like yeah, it's just like weird stuff like that. And then like the funny part about the minor leagues, like when you're having like when you're in a slump, right? And like you go to a town and they've got like some mega fan or something, and like they're just saying like the meanest stuff to you, and you're like, man, why did I choose this? Like they're saying
Yep.
stuff about me, about my mom, my brother. I'm like, man, like this is brutal. But like I look back on that stuff now, and again, like it part of it's funny, right? Like it's kind of funny. Um, Number two, I think I grew from it, and number three, and most importantly, and I try and convey this to my current players, like that's the kind of stuff that I hope helps me in my profession now, right?
Yep.
Because I'm a hitting coach now, but there's so much more to what these guys go through than just learning how to hit. Like we have to connect with them on a human level as
Yeah.
well. Like at the end of the day, they have to trust me. Like if they don't trust me and trust that, my mind is with their best interest, then it really doesn't matter. So me being able to convey some of that hopefully helps to build that relationship that like, hey man, like, this terrible hotel you're staying in, like I've done that before and I'm going to stay in it with you now on this trip too. But yeah, like immediately my mind goes to things like that. Just late sleepless nights and terrible hotels and 5 guys in a 2-bedroom apartment. But it's fun though, right? Like it's kind of like a fraternity. Like
Yes.
I
Yep.
made such good friends, people that I still stay in touch with, people that I'm still really close with, because it's a bond that's kind of hard to explain unless you've done it. And I think you
Yep.
get a certain element of that at the college level as well. Like that, I don't think that's exclusive to professional baseball.
Yeah. I mean, like from my, I guess like from like my journey. So playing at a JUCO level, I mean, I I probably talk to them more than I talk to anyone else.
Yep.
I mean, like even like to this day,
Yeah.
and it's just, I mean, there was, let's see, what is it, like I lived off of like $50 a month, so I had to
Yeah.
like stretch all that, but I did not care because, I mean, I had fun, and then like everything that I look back on, it was worth it, 100%.
JUCO Bandits, man.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. It was a blast, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, the minor leagues, like it's an absolute grind. Like you gotta want it.
Yeah, and I tell people that a lot too. Like I'm like I said, super grateful for my time at Austin P. But I would not have had any of the opportunities that I've had as a player or a coach had it not been for my time at junior college. Like
Yeah.
I grew a ton. That's I think where I really learned how to work. And I think this is a hard thing for people to wrap their mind around. We're told as kids that you work hard and you get the things that you want, right? And I think what junior college did for me is it kind of took me out of that like any sort of victim mentality.
Yep.
And it taught me that like you work hard to get an opportunity to have the things that you want. Like nothing's guaranteed. Like hard work doesn't guarantee you anything. And I think that's an important lesson for young men and women to learn. Like I don't think that's an easy lesson to learn. But I do think it's an important one. Like just because you worked hard and did things the right way, like things aren't always going to go your way. And when they
Nope.
don't, then you're faced with a decision. You can either find a way to make it work and try again, or you can feel sorry for yourself. Right. So like
Yeah.
that was, I think, the most important thing that I learned and something that I'm eternally grateful for. The guys that I mentioned earlier, Steve Friend and Will Tavis, my coaches that really instilled that in me. And that's something that I've taken into my adult life for sure.
So yeah, like it's also like a kids, or also like as being a kid, and in like high school, like you always want to go straight to like D1, D2, but JUCO teaches you a lot more lessons, I feel, from like what
Yeah.
I've, I mean, from like what I've learned.
And look, man, like I've been on both ends, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm a JUCO product. I'm loyal to that level, but I've also coached at the Division I level. And like, look, there are kids that are ready to go play Division I baseball. And like, I'm not here to tell you that if you get an opportunity to go play Division I baseball at a high school that you shouldn't do it. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, yeah. I mean,
But I
I would
think,
do it.
yeah, like I think, but some people look, and I used to tell people that, right? And like, they would get offended to a certain degree. Like, if I would say, I think your kid should go play JUCO, and they're like, well, and they take it as an insult. Like, it's not an insult. Like, it's a great opportunity, and that's just kind of where you're at physically, right? Or maybe that's where you're at academically. Like, people
Yeah.
forget about the academic portion. Like, I learned a ton. I actually was way more at peace with, the way it worked out for me in the recruiting process as a player after I got on the coaching side of it. And I had some really good mentors on the recruiting side when I was working in college. And all of a sudden I started looking back at my own career and I'm like, oh, like, okay, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
that's probably why I ended up at JUCO, because I had like a 2.4 in high school. Like, it all makes sense now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's so do you know where uh L- Lewis and Clark State is? It's in
Yeah.
Lewiston, Idaho.
Idaho, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have so actually quite a few of my buddies. So they didn't have the best grades, but they were like D1 ready for sports.
Yeah.
I mean for baseball.
Yeah,
So then it's like a lot of them like from up here go to LC State
for sure.
and they just like run through teams.
Yeah, they're good. I had some JUCO teammates actually that landed up there. So yeah.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Yeah, our coaches in college were from there and or like so they played there like when they played in college. So their mentality was wild, man. I mean, it was like we weren't like allowed to wear like batting gloves. I mean, we did everything that they did just because it toughened them up and it was rough. But
Yeah.
now I look back at it, worth it.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's all about culture, man. Like
oh yeah, exactly.
that to me is the coolest thing about sports is like the atmospheres and the cultures that you get to be around. Like that's the coolest part to me. And like, whatever does it for you, like I'm not necessarily one that's gonna tell my guys not to wear batting gloves or whatever. But if that's your thing and that's your culture, then like more power to you, right? Like everyone's got to find their own culture. And I think the most important thing about cultivating culture is it has to be authentic. Like
Yeah.
I think kids are smarter than we give them credit for sometimes. And like in my case, they're young adults, right? Like if you're being inauthentic in your leadership style, I think they see right through that. And then I think that kind of kills your culture. So yeah. So I mean, whatever's authentic to who you are as a leader, that becomes a reflection of your program and that ultimately becomes your culture. So
So I guess how did you get into coaching now? So like how did your career playing end and then therefore go into coaching?
yeah, so I spent all in all, I spent 5 years playing professional baseball. 2.5 of those with the Giants, and 2.5 to 3 seasons of independent baseball. So spent a couple years with the Giants. I was like, this because you said you pulled up my baseball reference earlier. I was a
I got
very,
it.
very average professional baseball player. I was a corner guy, so I was there to hit. I hit a little bit, not enough. I hit some home runs some years, and some years I didn't hit enough. So spent a couple years with the Giants, got released. That was tough. I think that's like the flip side of the coin. Like
Yeah.
it's really cool to get drafted by your hometown team, right? Like that's a cool experience. And I don't mean to belittle that at all. But I think the part that people forget is that I also got fired by the team that I
Yep.
grew up cheering for. And that's hard, right? Like I was a young man. I was 23 years old, I believe, when that happened. So I was young
Oh
and
yeah.
I didn't. I think the hardest part was I didn't see it coming. Like I felt like that. I felt personally ready for a breakout year. Like I felt like I had a really good off season. I really liked where I was at, and I got cut at the end of spring training. So that was tough. Wasn't sure if I wanted to keep playing. The Giants farm director at that time, who let me go, he kind of encouraged me to keep playing, and they helped kind of put me in contact with some independent ball teams. But they were
Which is
like, "Hey,
good.
man, like if you don't want to play, give us a call. We can look into player development or scouting or whatever." And I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll let you know." Went and played. Had kind of a rough road in indie ball. Starting out, I signed with one team. I played in the Frontier League, which is mostly in the
Yep.
Midwest. Signed with one team. It just didn't work out. A lot of what they told me in the contract negotiations just ended up not really coming to fruition. I was told one thing and then another thing happened, and ultimately ended up going and asking for my release from that team shortly after the season began. Got my release after they put me on the Phantom DL for a couple weeks. Went to another team, thought I was done playing, got a call like in the middle of the night from a team in Ohio. They asked me to come play, and I said, sure, why not? Showed up, played for a couple weeks with them, got traded unexpectedly.
I didn't know. Actually, I did not know that you could get traded in indie ball.
Oh yeah, you can.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, and you can get traded in between leagues too. So like in my case, it was within the same league.
Mm-hmm.
So I got traded to a team called the Gateway Grizzlies. And I just remember being really down at that time and having a hard time and just not knowing if I wanted, like you said, like there's got to be moments where you question if you want to do this anymore. And like that was certainly one of those moments. I had been released twice and traded in a span of like 3 months. And so I remember packing my car. I was right outside like the Cleveland area kind of. And I remember packing my car and I knew I was going to start driving west because I was either going to drive to St. Louis and play or I was just going to keep going and go to California and get a job. Right. Like I wasn't totally sure. Made the decision a couple hours into the drive that I'd give it a try. Got there, ended up liking it a decent amount when I got there and met some good guys. And I think, gosh, I don't remember what game it was. It was like my third or fourth game. Like it was really early. I pulled my hamstring. And so then I'm on the DL. So I missed like 6 weeks and I'm like, man, came back, had a good finish to the year, ended up spending 2.5 years there, really enjoyed it. And then I had decided that 2017 would be my last year. I just kind of felt like I was just spinning my tires at that point. I still enjoyed playing, but I could see the writing on the wall. I was 25 years old, stuck in indie ball. I didn't have any experience playing above A ball. So I decided that was my last year. About a month into that season, got traded again unexpectedly. So I ended up in Marion, Illinois, right outside of Carbondale, in Southern Illinois with the Miners and Mike Pinto, who runs the show over there, who's a great guy. I'd played against him for years, so I knew Mike a little bit. And I think he liked me mostly just because I'm Italian and he's Italian. So I think that was the connection there. But yeah, so I finished my career there. Super grateful for that organization. They brought me in and I felt really at home there at a time in my career where I probably wasn't ready for a change of scenery, didn't really want one. But they brought me in and I made some really good friends there as well. But just decided at the end of that year that I didn't want to play anymore, but that I wanted to stay in baseball. So started looking around, wasn't super interested in doing the private sector stuff full time. Wanted to stay at more advanced levels with older people and, just kind of started scouring job boards and things like that. And I sent out several feelers to programs that I was either somewhat familiar with or were a part of the country that I wanted to work in or that had posted a job. And I think I sent out like 6 or 7 of them, got no reply from like 3 or 4 of them. Got we'll see where we're at in a couple months from a couple of them. And, so I was just like, man, I don't know if it's going to work out.
Yep.
And I remember sitting at a hotel in Florence, Kentucky, my last year of pro ball. One of those disaster hotels that I was mentioning earlier where like the air conditioning units like got tinfoil on it and it's frozen. And and I remember kind of looking over the ABCA job boards and Arkansas State University had a job opening. They were looking for a volunteer that could help with their infielders and assist with the offense, which is kind of what I did. And so I put out my application there and, I just kind of had a good feeling about it when I did it. I don't know why, because nobody else was emailing me back at that time. So, I just had a good feeling and I got a call, ironically enough, a couple of days later from a guy named Rowdy Hardy, who is, I know that's a great name, outstanding name.
I love that.
Yeah, one of my good friends
Rowdy
now,
Hardy.
one of the mentors I spoke about earlier. He's also an Austin P alumni. He's in the Hall of Fame over there. He's legendary. Yeah, he pitched up to AAA, and he called me, and it was like the funniest like job interview type thing I've ever had. Like he told me who he was. We talked about Clarksville and Austin P a little bit. We had that in common, and then he kind of finished it with like, all right, well, we saw your application, and my boss, Coach Raffo, asked me to call you and basically just make sure you're not a jerk. Like, he used probably worse language than that, but he said, so I'll let him know that you're all right, and he's going to give you a call tomorrow. I'm like, oh, okay. And so that was like that. Yeah, that was like the first interview. And then Coach Raffo called me the next day, and we had a good conversation. And the next week after that, he asked me to come up and check it out. And so I drove in on an off day and saw the campus, and he just laid it out for me, man. He's like, look, he's like, we can't offer you a lot financially. Like, that's just kind of the way it goes at the Division I level with the volunteer coach, which, that's a whole nother issue that baseball's got to figure out at some point. But he said, I can give you an opportunity to come in and work. And I said, that's really all I want. I was in a position where through all my years in the minor leagues, I had learned how to stretch not a lot of money.
Yep.
So I was ready for that. And
JUCO, that's the same thing.
No doubt. JUCO. No doubt. So I got hooked up over there. Coach Raffo brought me on, and I started that fall. And like I said, it kind of began with me mostly working with the infielders and just kind of dipping my feet in the water with the hitters a little bit.
So, yeah, because it builds your resume. I'm like, that alone shows that you volunteered to coach. So therefore, later on, it'll help out. Yeah,
and he's been around for a long time, and he's, anyone that you talk to that knows him has nothing but good things to say. Just an outstanding guy, family man, and he was a volunteer himself, and he's had an outstanding career. He was a volunteer at Mississippi State where he played, and worked his way into a full-time position, and now has been a head coach for, I believe, 13 years. So,
wow.
He's proof that you can do it, right? I think, to me, like, the volunteer role to a certain extent is kind of like a weeding out process. Like, how hard are you willing to work to show that you really want to do this and that you belong? And that's ultimately what I decided that I wanted to do.
Could you kind of compare like could you compare like the volunteering work that as being in the minor leagues, like with the pay?
Honestly, it's worse. So that's a tricky question to answer because it depends on the spot. So it comes from camp money. So like the large revenue schools, like SEC schools, for example, their volunteers probably do significantly better because they bring in a lot more money through camps. But the university can't give you any money. At a smaller school like Arkansas State, it was stipends. I was living on stipends, and that's kind of how volunteers live. I'd get a stipend at the beginning of the first semester and a stipend at the beginning of the second semester. And then anything else that I made was up to me. And, I say that, but I had some help. Like Coach Raffo would kind of help me run some extra camps to make some money. One of my other mentors and really good friends, who was the recruiting coordinator over there, Rick Warno, he was awesome with that as well, because he was a volunteer at Little Rock before he got into his full-time gigs. And so he kind of helped me figure out, like, do this, do that. And then they'd also kind of hook me up with some camps that were off campus, that like people that were looking for help, so I could go work. But yeah, it's a lot, man. It's not an easy way to make a living. I estimate.
You gotta love it. You gotta absolutely love it.
People that don't coach will probably think I'm crazy. People that listen to this and do coach, they'll nod their head and be like, yeah, that's about right. I mean, I estimate, we were working 60 to 80 hours a week sometimes, if you count the amount of time you spent on the bus.
Yep.
And the financial reward just isn't there. Again, it's how badly do you want to do this? Like, are you willing to pay your dues and wait your turn? Right. It just wasn't my turn. And I'm grateful for that time now. I think I learned a lot, both as a coach and as a man. So,
yeah, I mean, like the stories that like I've learned in baseball, I mean, like I still are with me every day, and that's just how I am going to go forward.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why I enjoy doing like the baseball podcast stuff, is because it's more than just what's on the field. There's so much more like behind the scenes. And people don't understand
I think for me, it transcends baseball too. Like, there's so many things that have happened in my personal life, in my family life, things like that, that some of the lessons that you learn, as stupid as it sounds, whether that be through practice or through, the games and the adversities and all that stuff, like, it really does, like, in a weird way, kind of prepare you for that. Like, some stuff happens and nothing can really totally prepare you for it. But I think it points you in the right direction, and I hate using like cliche terms like building character and things like that, but I do think like as a coach now, when I look at my job, like that's a big part of my job. Like my job to me is a lot more than teaching guys how to hit, right? Like that's obviously a super important part.
Yep.
Like if I suck at teaching guys how to hit, like I'm probably not going to have a job. But like I do think it's important that we help them become better men too. And that sounds super cliche, but I
It's
think
100% true.
yeah, I
100%
think
true.
if you don't have that mindset in this profession, I just think you're kind of in it for the wrong reasons to a certain extent. And don't get me wrong, I love teaching the hitting.
Yeah.
I'm super competitive. I love to win. That's all super important to me as well. But again, like there's certain things that kind of transcend the game. So
Yeah. I mean, like, probably so my mentors, like, still are like past coaches. I mean, just because the way that they went about coaching and showing that there's more than just like the game of baseball. I mean, there's so much more to it. And I mean, like the bus trips, like with teammates, I mean, I've countless of stories, and they just like every time, like I think, yeah. So you're laughing like that. I mean, it's just
yeah,
like, dude, there's so many things that like bring baseball players together.
yeah, for sure.
So growing up, who was your favorite player watching?
Oh, that's easy. That was Barry Bonds for sure.
Yes, sir.
I know that's like persona non grata for some in Major League Baseball, but no, he was the best. And
Steroids save baseball. That's just I will
yeah,
firmly say.
I won't I won't get into that argument. We'll leave that one alone. But I just think he was just as someone who studies the game obviously
Yeah.
pretty intensely now with what I do for a living. I mean, we have so many great young ambassadors for our game now. Like it's really exciting to see this wave, this generation of players that are coming through now. But I mean, Barry Bonds, like it was like everyone in the stadium stopped. Like when he came up to bat, like everything
Yep.
stopped. And I still remember being at the game when I was a kid. I couldn't tell you how old I was. I don't remember what year it was, but I remember I was there and the Giants were playing the Dodgers, and it was back in the day when Eric Gagne was like the man. And
Oh, were you at the like at oh no way.
I was at that game. We were about to leave. So this is a perfect example of what I mean, like the impact that Barry Bonds had. Like, so my dad, bless his heart, like it was like he would take us to games all the time. Like he was a great dad. He took really good care of us. Whenever his company would get tickets, we would go. And I have two younger brothers, and we would go a lot. And like, so I was like halfway in that generation where I grew up going to games at Candlestick, and then they opened the new ballpark when I was
Yep.
like probably right before I became a teenager. And so like Barry Bonds was part of those teams. And we were there, but the traffic getting out of that place, like I don't know if you're familiar with the Bay Area at all, but the traffic in the
Yeah.
Bay Area is
Yes.
a nightmare. So
Yep.
anything we could do to eliminate traffic, my dad would do it. And my dad has worked my whole life, still works to this day. And he's always been an early riser. So like, again, like as a kid, I didn't really get it. Now I get it. I'm like, yeah, man, like you get up at like 5, that sucks. So he always wanted to leave the games early. And so we were about to leave that game. And that home run happened in the 9th inning. And it was, I believe it was a 2-0 game. It was either 2-0 or 3-1. And we were about to leave. And I remember we stopped up on the concourse and dad was like, wait, Bonds is about to hit. And so we got to see that at bat, which like I think it was like 101 on the hands and Bonds pulled it, fell into the water.
Yeah.
And then I think he threw him a changeup and he pulled that, fell into the water. And then he comes 99, like, and Bonds hits it out to right center, which for people that aren't familiar with that ballpark is like 400
Deep. That is deep.
So yeah, I mean there was there was a bunch of guys that I idolized, like more random ones would be like JT Snow. I really like JT Snow.
Okay, yeah.
But Bonds, I mean, it's hard to argue against Bonds.
Yeah, I mean, I have watched that at bat on on like Facebook and like Instagram probably at least 40 times.
So it's like that one. It's that there's a couple from when I was a Giants fan. There's that one, the Travis Ishikawa home run.
Yeah.
I believe it was against the Cardinals in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that I'm an Indians guy, the Rajay Davis home run in the World Series against the Cubs, those are like my favorite ones to watch on loop.
Well, I'm a Cubs fan.
Oh.
Die hard. I mean, I don't think I'll show it too much, but I have my Cubs tattoo.
Yep,
my World Series one since
there you go.
Rajay Davis pretty much single-handedly made me almost like shit my pants. It was
Yeah, that was, and I'm hoping to help the city of Cleveland get back and redeem the wounds from that one. I know that was a tough one and those were
yeah,
both franchises that were,
yeah. I mean,
someone was going to be heartbroken no matter what, and
yeah.
hopefully next time it comes out in our favor. So
At the end of, I mean, I think going into Game 7, I mean, of course, like I wanted the Cubs to win, but it was just like it was an unreal series. So I was like, you know what, whoever wins, it's. I
yeah,
mean, that's
that was
how it goes.
that was a great World Series.
No, yeah, no. I specifically remember the Rajay Davis hit. That was, no, I think that like legit, that was probably almost like teary eyed. Like shit, here we go again.
Yeah.
No, it's. I mean, Indians. I mean, you guys got some young guys, great talent.
Yeah, and we have a really exciting farm system right now. Some guys that I'm really excited to get back to work, and like I said, just help in any way that I can. Really, with some of those guys, it's more like staying out of their way and thinking, you kind of making sure they have what they need. But yeah, for sure, really exciting, and just kind of excited to be part of that process and
Mm-hmm.
see that maturation of guys getting to kind of live out their dream and playing any role that I can in that.
Yeah. So I guess like that kind of like reminds me. So in 2018 I moved down to South Florida like for the year. And then I actually bought season tickets like to the Marlins. And then like the week that I bought season tickets, they traded away everyone. It was
Yep.
just like, here's an all-star, here's an all-star, here's an all-star. And then like all the fans were like, okay, well, now the Marlins suck again. But then like they got a lot of young guys, a lot of talented players,
Yeah.
and I mean, like the fans down there, like I mean, they had no idea like what was happening, but like me, like being a baseball guy and like understanding that, I'm like, there's a lot of talent, and it was it was really cool to watch like the young guys like come out and play against like the big teams and just give 100, uh, uh, like 100%.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's a
It's
no name
awesome
at
to
some
watch
point,
them.
right?
Exactly. I mean,
Shoot your shot.
even like Mike Trout, he was a no name guy at one point.
I mean, granted, his no name phase ended when he was like 13, probably, but
That is true. I mean, I think he got drafted like, well, I mean, it was still first round, but it was like 30th pick. And then if you look at the names like before him, it was just it's I mean,
hard, man.
baseball's weird.
Projecting out talent's really difficult.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially and say like for your side, like for being like a player development. Do do you think it's say because you kind of like said it earlier, like it's kind of like because they are all professional athletes and they are talented. I mean, obviously. So you said that it's more of like you're just giving them like what they need to succeed. Is that more of like what player development is?
Yeah, I think
Kind of.
it's kind of a balance, right? So like obviously they're all professionals and that commands a certain level of respect. They've earned that.
Yeah.
So you don't come in and just impose your will. I think the biggest thing is you have to look at it through like an individual lens, right? So like
Yeah.
when I look at my roster, for example, like there's going to be some guys that really need some like swing development, right? Like there's some things going on in terms of their movement pattern that is going to be an issue at this level. That something they maybe got away with in high school or wherever they came from. They maybe
Hmm.
got away with it because they were supremely talented or had elite perceptual skills, things like that. And then you look at some other guys and they maybe already display elite movement patterns and maybe they need some help understanding the more tactical side of what we do and understanding how to work in a bat like a professional. And I think the thing is, like, again, and I hit on it earlier, I think part of being able to do any of that, number one, you have to identify what the individual needs and cater to that. But I think most importantly, even before that, is you have to build that trust. Like,
Hmm.
I'll spend a lot of time early in a season with a new group of players, like just kind of like joking around with them and really trying to build a relationship because again, I don't think, and I think this is true of most anything, that the people that you're more inclined to listen to and take advice from are the people that you think are looking out for your best interest, right? Like people
For
don't
sure.
care.
100%.
People don't care what you have to say until they believe that you care about them. Essentially, I think would be the message. So,
For sure.
when I look at player development, I think what we're dealing with is how can we get them from they're already in an elite category of just being professional baseball players, like what's going to push that individual over the top? Like what
It's like
makes
the
them
small little like the tweaks
for
that
sure.
all add up.
It's a much different approach than working with a group of middle school kids or high school kids that need a ton of like technical development and skill acquisition. Like with our guys, it's a lot of fine tuning. But again, it's super individual. Like it's impossible to throw a blanket over everyone or cookie cut one program for everyone. So again, as a coach, that becomes your job to figure out where and how to spend your time with each guy.
Yeah, see, I mean, like so like I'm saying the minors, you got hitting, pitching, you got everything, and then you got all like the small coaches just fine tuning it all.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool operation to see. And I know like I can't speak for other organizations, but I know like within our culture, like collaboration is a big deal. Like you hear that from my bosses all the time. Like James Harris is our director of player development and Alex Echelman's our director of hitting. And, I could say the same for directors of all our different departments. Like that's a huge thing that we spend a ton of time talking about. And that we emphasize as an organization is leaning into each other. So I can say like with my coworkers, we all speak pretty frequently, right? And we'll bounce ideas off of each other, which I think is kind of cool because it's different than the college side to a certain extent. Like, for example, if you're the hitting coach at a college, like, and the boss wants an answer on something hitting, I mean, you can maybe call one of your buddies if you want to, but the buck kind of stops with you, right?
Yep.
Whereas in my spot, if I'm kind of stuck on something, for example, in Arizona, like I'll have another hitting coach with me at that level, just because at the academy level we have so many players. But I could also call our low A hitting coach or our high A hitting coach and like, hey man, what do you think? Or like, have you worked with this guy before? Or have you done this before? So that's kind of cool. Like I said, it's just kind of a cool operation to see like working because everyone's working together. And again, that
it's like
sounds
a fine-tuned machine.
We try. Yeah, we try. We try. We make mistakes just like everybody else, but yeah, I think we do a good job in that regard for sure.
Yeah, because you guys are human and you guys just have badass jobs.
Yeah, and I think that's part of like what's important about being a coach is like showing some of that transparency and vulnerability even with your players. Like if I make a mistake, like I think it's important that they know, right? Like I don't think it does anyone any good if I try and cover it up and make excuses or blame it on them, deflect it, right? Like it's all part of it. Like we're all pulling on the same end of the rope. Like we're all trying to get to the same spot, right? So I think that's where that comes from.
So how did you get involved like with Indians?
Yeah, great question as well. So I spent my 2 years at Arkansas State, like we talked about earlier. I originally was brought in to do the infield stuff. Like I said, I kind of had like a small hand in the hitting to begin with. And then I think I kind of gained the trust of my boss, and I was really fortunate. Coach Raffo trusted me maybe more than he probably should have at the time. I'm super great. And I tell him that every time I see him. I'm super grateful for him. He eventually kind of turned over the majority of the responsibility to the hitters with me. And it was me and Rick Warner, who I mentioned earlier, who again is a good friend of mine. And Rick had a background in coaching hitting, and he was kind of my mentor on the hitting side, really helped me a lot early in my career. But he is an excellent recruiter. And with that comes a lot of time on the road. And especially when you get a new staff in and you're trying to flip a roster over, a lot of time on the road, seen a lot of guys. So he just physically wasn't able to be there all the time. So that kind of just landed me in that role by default. We ran the hitting together, but they trusted me as a young volunteer to kind of run it by myself on the days he wasn't there. And that included some game days. So I got a lot of experience doing that. And, so fast forward to the next year, we always had home and homes with Missouri State. One of my really good friends, Joe Lincoln, who coached me at Austin Peay, then went over to Missouri State later. And so, it was always kind of fun. We played down. I'd always get to see him and we go to dinner or whatever afterwards. But The year that I got put into a more front and center role as the hitting coach, they came to us. I don't remember exactly what it was. We played a weekend series actually that year. We scored a lot. Like we scored we scored like 40 something runs that weekend.
That's a great weekend right there.
Yeah, no, we had a good weekend, and like I give my guys a ton of credit. Like they were ready for that weekend. We put out a scouting report and a plan, and they executed it that weekend to like a coach's dream, right? Like you watch film and you give them stuff on different pitchers, and you're like, I think we can attack them this way and this way, and they just did it. Like they came out and they just absolutely freaking dominated, and it was really fun to watch. And so I think that kind of got my name on the map with Missouri State. So ultimately after that season, Missouri State called me. Missouri State's head coach, Keith Gutton, called me at the end of the year, and they were looking to bring in a new volunteer. And they, like I said, all volunteer roles aren't created equal in terms of finances. And they were able to improve my situation a little bit there. And so I decided that was the best thing for me. I was really excited. Missouri State's a perennial mid-major power. They've been to the College World Series. They've hosted super regionals. Keith Gutton is a future Hall of Famer. Paul Evans, his pitching coach, also a future Hall of Famer. Matt Lawson, the hitting coach, the recruiting coordinator. So they brought me in to help Matt with the hitters. Matt was the hitting coach at that time, still is. Super, super hard worker, good dude. Loved my time over there. And I was pumped to be there. I was going to be the assistant hitting coach. And then they got a huge staff over there, which is great. Like there's only 4 of us doing everything at Arkansas State. We had Aaron Meyer was helping. He was a GA out with the infielders and the hitters as well. Nick Petrie was a GA at that time, helping with the pitchers. We had Garrett Boyum.
Everyone has like 2 jobs.
Yeah, dude. Like all of a sudden, like I'm showing up to work. I'm like, wait, you mean I just have to do the hitting stuff? I don't have to like drag the field and run the camps? I'm like, this is great. So I love my time over there. And then it was not, oh man, it was like a week before I was supposed to move down there is when I found out I had gotten sick. And that kind of flipped my mindset a little bit, just because in the volunteer role, you're not on full-time benefits. And at that point I started kind of exploring pro jobs a little bit, just because I knew that, I could get some health benefits, truthfully, was a huge part of it. And, I think the Indians, to a degree, I understood that. Not that I didn't want to work in pro ball. I don't mean to make it sound like that, but I think that the need for health benefits was kind of what initially pushed me in that direction. So I started looking. I actually originally interviewed with another team, which I won't share live on the air, but funny enough, I called Joel Mangrum, who I mentioned earlier, who currently is a pitching coordinator with us with the Indians. And I said, hey man, like I landed this job interview. I got to go down to, blah, blah, blah city. What do I wear? Like, I'm like a kid, like a kid. I'm like, what do I like? Do I wear a suit? Like,
how old were you?
I was 27. So I wasn't actually a kid. Like,
okay. Well, I mean, I'm 26.
Okay.
So, I mean, like if I would not know what the hell to wear.
I'm like, do I wear a tuxedo? Like, I don't know what to wear. And so Joel,
I would have worn tuxedo. I mean, that's
right. in typical Joel fashion, who, again, someone that I'm super grateful for and someone who's opened a ton of doors for me, did not answer my question. He goes, are you willing to come to pro ball? And I'm like, Joel, like, what do I wear? He's like, no, are you willing to leave? And I'm like, yes, I'm willing to leave. And he's like, all right, I'll call you back. So like, I didn't even know at the time when I called him, but the Indians were looking for a hitting coach as well. And so he kind of like threw my name in the hat with them. Had the hitting coordinators at the time. We had 2 hitting coordinators at the time, Pete and Kevin. They've both since moved on to other opportunities. They both called me. Alex Eckelman, my current boss, director of hitting for us, called me and kind of got the interview process started. And that's just kind of how it went. And I took the job around Christmas time in 2019, while I was, in the middle of all my, like I said, my health stuff. And I think the one more thing I would add before we transition to that part and Keith Gutton, I called Coach Gutton right after I got diagnosed and just told him what was going on. I didn't really know what to say because, like I said, like I know what that job commands from a
Yep.
time standpoint, and I didn't really know what to expect at that point because I hadn't started treatment yet. But I knew that it was potentially going to take a lot, right?
Yeah.
Whether that be time or just be draining. And I called him and I just said, look, I respect this position. I have a ton of respect for the program that you've built. I don't think that I can physically be the guy that you thought you were getting. Like, if you need to move on, I totally understand. And I truly meant that. Like,
Yeah.
because again, I take what I do really seriously. And
And
I
'cause
mean,
that takes a lot. I mean, like from you saying that, like, I mean, 'cause you had that opportunity, but like it's hard to take a step back. I mean, like
yeah,
at this age and realize, hey, like this is what's best for me at this time.
yeah. And again, like I'm so grateful for so many people, but those guys over at Missouri State, I mean, he did not flinch. Like he was
Yeah.
like, he's like, what are you crazy? Like, we're not going to turn our backs on you now. He said, whatever you need, we'll take care of you. And they did. Like, I mean, I was at that time, I was getting treatment every 3 weeks throughout the fall. So I was commuting from Springfield, Missouri to Nashville, Tennessee, where my oncologist was, which
Mm.
I don't know how how familiar people are with geography, but that's not a short commute.
Nope.
And I would miss days at a time sometimes. And again, never batted an eye. And then so, when I got the opportunity with the Indians, he was excited for me, and I'm again just super grateful for him. And there will not be a person. Well, I shouldn't say there won't be a person, but I will be up there with the people that are the most happy for that guy when he goes into the College Baseball Hall of Fame, which he will. And again, and I would say the same thing about Paul Evans and Matt Lawson and the rest of that staff. Just the way that they accommodated and the way people picked up the slack for me when I wasn't physically able to be there because I had things that I had to take care of. Just super grateful, and they were super happy for me when I got this opportunity, and I still stay in touch with those guys. And so it's always a conflict of interest for me when Arkansas State and Missouri State play every year. Now it's like I try not to watch. I try and just like bury my head in the pillow and not watch. But yeah, just super grateful for those guys. Just really, I've been really fortunate. I've worked with and around and for just outstanding people, and that continues today with the Indians as well. But just really, really fortunate.
See, it's awesome to have a great baseball family. I mean, everyone watches over everyone, and I mean, like everyone's closer than you think.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I think I'm really close with my blood family as well, and they've
Hmm.
they've been super supportive throughout my entire career. My brothers Patrick and Dominic and my parents, they've been so supportive through my playing career. They've seen me through some dark times. They've seen me at some really really high times, really exciting times. Um, to have their support is really important. And then, going through some of that stuff with my health and being away from them, it meant that much more to have people around
Yeah.
me. And I should mention too, like I said, Joe Lincoln was a coach there when I came over. Like that dude let me live in his house when I was sick, right? Like he was literally taking care of me, like literally put a roof over my head, helped me get the things that I need. Joe and Katie, like, and their boys, like they kind of welcomed me into their family during that time. And that's the stuff that's really cool, man. Like,
Yep.
I tell my players all the time, like people tell you that the memories fade and you'll forget about the wins and the losses. And like, I don't think that's true. Like I love to compete, right? Like I still remember the wins and the losses but there is something to certainly be said for the relationships. Like
Hmm.
that to me
Yep.
is what I treasure the most. Like I have rings and stuff like that and that's all great. And I want more, don't get me wrong. But,
They're
those
those are
friendships
just
I've built.
those are just like objects. Those aren't. Like yeah, like the stories like behind them like are like within you, but like re- relationships that you have with people that's a lot deeper and then goes further.
For sure. So I'm super grateful for that. And like I said, I'm really, really grateful for the people at Arkansas State and Missouri State that kind of took care of me during that transition and during that time when I wasn't really sure what was going on.
Yeah, it's baseball, family, it all ties in.
Yep, for sure.
So I have one more question before we start to wrap it up. Have you done your March Madness bracket?
I have not. I don't mean to offend anyone. I'm much more of a football guy than a basketball guy when it comes to sports. Outside of baseball, I don't watch a ton of college basketball.
Yep.
So if I did fill out a bracket, it would be pure speculation and guessing. I'd be filling it out.
That's what I do. I just
Yeah. So like, well, I mean, that's the funny thing. Like even people that are like experts, sometimes that's kind of what it feels like. So,
yeah.
um, so no, I have not. And I went to a mid-major college too. So I think, had I gone to Kansas University or Duke or something like that, it might be different. But
Yeah.
no, I'm much more of a football guy.
Yeah. I mean, and say like for me, I mean, personally, I would rather watch college sports than like professional sports, or I guess like, but I like the big three sports.
Sure.
But it's like I feel like the March Madness, everyone has to at least have one team.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's exciting. I'll watch it, but I'm certainly not going to place any wagers on it because I have
did
no clue what's
did
going
you
on.
play any other sports like growing up?
Yeah, I did. So I played when I was really young. I tried just about everything.
Yep.
I played soccer when I was young. I actually did swim team one year. I have some pretty embarrassing pictures of me in a speedo. um, I played basketball up until high school, and then I played football in high school as well as baseball.
I look back and I kind of wish I actually did swim during high school because I was right before baseball season,
Yeah,
and that would have probably helped out my arm and my whole body
it's
in general.
yeah. You might be right about that.
Because like I wonder if I did all that and actually took care of my arm more. See, it's all the things that like you think back and you're like, what if? But then again, everything happens for a reason.
No
And
doubt.
then, but hey, so let's wrap it up a little bit. So, what would you say to let's see, a minor league player who is in a bad slump right now, third year playing, and hasn't had that breakout year? What would you say to him right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it goes back to what we talked about earlier and just staying in your shoes and controlling what you can control. I think, if you think about stuff like compound effects, that's kind of what I think of when I think of a slump. Um, Part of that is our inability sometimes as athletes in the heat of the moment to see past what's right in front of our face, right? And like we allow those bad at bats to start stacking up. So and that's part of I think what separates elite players and like I said, like all the guys that I get now are elite players, but like what's going to push them over the top, right?
Yep.
And so much of that is how they deal with things like that. Like guys can shorten the cycle, right? Like don't turn an 0 for 6 into an 0 for 25. Like be where your feet are, compete in this next at bat. Continue to prepare the way you prepare. I think one of the things that I see with young hitters particularly is if they have a bad game, they change their routine. And I'm like, why?
Yep.
Like we spent all this time figuring out what's a good routine for you. Now, like if there's an actual reason to change your routine, I'm not saying your routine has to be the same from the first day you go to rookie ball to the day you stop playing. Like that's not a great strategy either. But like you have to have a reason other than I'm 0 for 6. Like
Yeah.
if it's I'm 0 for 6 because I'm doing this, and this, and I want to change my routine, then like that makes more sense. Like it's all about that why. But I think it comes back to that and just being in the moment. And it really comes down to competing, man. Like if you can figure out a way to compete every pitch and compartmentalize certain things like that, it kind of helps to shorten that cycle. And that's a hard thing to get, particularly young players to understand. But it's so important. And it's so much easier for me to say that now, like sitting in the chair as a coach than it is as a hitter. But I think that's important too. And that's maybe part of what advice I would give to a new coach is like, remove yourself and try and put yourself back in their shoes and like, remember what that's like. Cause like as a coach, like I know you've gone 0 for 20 because that's why you're not playing anymore. Like I started going 0 for 20 all the time at the end of my career. And that's why I stopped playing. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's a big part of it.
You just gotta keep on grinding
Yeah.
and just keep on pushing. Well, Craig, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm always glad to come on. Appreciate it. That's